So while I did make a video a while back revisiting the LG V20, what I didn't do is talk about using it as a daily driver phone for a little bit. You know, a lot of people still talk about this phone in a really good light, and with good reason. And um, it was an experiment I wanted to do because, well, the V20 was the first phone that I reviewed on this channel. It was the phone that basically kickstarted my channel. I made videos praising it. I made videos criticizing LG for not marketing it well, as they pretty much do with every other phone. As they've pretty much done with every phone since after the LG G2 and G3. And I really love this phone still to this day. There are areas where it doesn't hold up, areas where new phones definitely destroy it, but there are other places where I would say if you use this as a basic phone, like not trying to game on it, like game hard on it, like you could play Call of Duty Mobile on it. I did it before and it worked just fine, and I did it on my screen cracked V20, so it looked a bit off, but it played decently enough. There were some frame drops. Honestly, this has a Snapdragon 820. It's not an 845, 55, or 65, so don't necessarily expect to get the smoothest frame rates or the smoothest gameplay all the time. But what it definitely did do is it kind of beat out the Shield tablet, because the Shield tablet got super hot, for one, and it was even more jittery. And it doesn't help that since the Shield tablet is old, like when did it come out? Like 2013 or something like that, 2014. Nobody is really supporting this tablet anymore, and thus there's no real way to be able to control with the NVIDIA Shield controller that game. You basically just have to use the on-screen controls. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the V20. So, what initially made me want to go back to this? One, both my V20s are unlocked. This was my friend's. I asked him if I could use it because back when I got jumped and I had to use my cracked screen V20, I was like, I can't do that. I don't want to risk it getting even more messed up. So I asked him if I could use it. Did that. Then when I finally got both my Note 8 and V30 back, my dad needed a new phone because the V10 just decided to finally kaput and, break itself, die. So my dad bought this from my friend. I gave him the case that I had for it, and then he used it until I gave him my V40, which is like, a whole year after the fact. So it held up between that and then. He had to get a new battery for it. It would shut off at like 15%. And then what I did, like recently, is I bought a 4380 milliamp hour battery for the V20. And that has been really handy and really interesting to see how well this holds up. So let me talk about this here. So in terms of daily use, what would I say the V20? The V20 is still really good with stuff like call quality is still really nice. The mics obviously will still be really good. Texting is fine. Obviously, if you have gone from V20, V30 and onward, you get the V20 has very bad haptics comparatively. It's very like springy and it feels kind of to use, but it's serviceable and it works well enough. And if that really does bother you, you could just turn them off in your keyboard settings, right? So it's not really that big of a deal. Greasy screen. The design. Oh god. Give me a second. Sorry, I got a phone call. But yeah, what I was talking about, the design. The metal construction of this phone with the removable back and stuff like that is still probably one of my favorite looks and feels of any phone. The only thing that I would say is a bit obnoxious is the camera, is the camera bulge, but it's fine. You know, I don't necessarily care about a camera bulge really because this is still a really good camera and it doesn't do what other phones really do and like wobble from side to side terribly. It's fairly balanced. So, say if you're putting it on a table like this, you won't be in typing, it won't be like whoa or anything like that. It's still functional. It's a plastic lens, so I'd be careful. I'd still get a case solely because of the camera, but everything else is fine. Mil standard A10G drop in weather resistance, and shock drop weather resistance and stuff like that. It's a very, they machine this out of aircraft grade aluminum. It still feels very premium. I don't know where this notion of, oh, glass is premium came from, but especially when you have to put a fucking case on it anyway. But you know, whatever. I'm not going to talk about that. V20 logo at the bottom, still, you know, your power button slash fingerprint sensor still works fairly well. Let me turn the screen down. But yeah, still works fairly well. It's a little bit sluggish because this is an old phone, but it's not horrendously sluggish or anything like that. Like, say, my Note 10 when I first got it, and before some updates came in, that in-display fingerprint sensor was so inconsistent, but we're not talking about that. You get the second display up on top, and don't mind the the sensor right there blinking. That's just obviously the proximity sensor. You cover it, and the second screen turns off. So when it's in your pocket, you won't be conserving battery like that. It's an LCD display. I forgot what it was, their quantum display. Their LCD quantum display. It's a quad HD resolution. You have your, I think it was an 8 megapixel camera at the front, and you could zoom in, zoom out wider, and it'll be a 5 megapixel camera. It's pretty good. It's not really that great anymore, but it was good enough for me at the time. I don't really take selfies, so it's not something I measure to this high standard that a lot of people like to measure. So keep that in mind. Get your USB-C down here, your speaker, which is actually pretty aggressively okay. Like, depending on the sound mixing of a video or something like that, it'll sound very low or it'll sound very high, but just a little bit distorted. Then you get the V20's claim to fame, the headphone jack. Come on, Note 10. The headphone jack. Hi-Fi quad DAC up in here. It was the first LG phone and pretty much the only other. And pretty much LG has been the only one doing it since that has a Hi-Fi quad DAC in it. I'm not going to get into semantics of what that means. Just know that this, along with every other LG phone after it, is the best you can get for smartphone audio when it comes to corded experiences. And they don't skip out on wireless either. You still get aptX HD, LDAC, and stuff like that. I don't know if you get that with this phone. Let me go into settings and look here real quick. So yeah, you go into developer options and you get the default SBC, AAC, aptX, aptX HD, LDAC, and enable optional codecs, disable optional codecs. So you get all those in there as well. And that's very nice. It's probably going to be one of the few phones you can still get today that can do both really, really well. Like, phones with USB Type-C to use for audio and stuff like that, they don't really sound that great. They might come with pretty good headphones in the box, but the internals just don't do it justice or anything like that. Say the Samsung AKG earbuds that come in the box, they're fine overall, even when you plug them into other phones, but they just don't sound that great. They're flat, and they don't seem to really put that much effort into wanting to make these phones sound great, sound amazing. So yeah, the V20 is still great for audio. I compared it to my G8, and it's still pretty comparable. There's obviously differences because this was audio tuned by B&O, whereas the G8 has audio tuned by Meridian. They're two different audio companies. So there are differences in some places, but it's very minor, and it doesn't make one sound way better than the other in any sort of aspect. There is definitely more detail on the G8, but they both do everything else pretty much similarly, so whatever. The one thing that I will say though is that going back to this phone, there are indeed some issues that you will have to keep in mind. Since this is an LCD display and this is like what, a 4-year-old phone at this point, expect screen retention. I get it quite a bit, and it's something that just happens with phones as they age, right? Screen burn-in, screen retention, whether you're OLED or LCD, it'll happen. It's just pretty much inevitable at this point. And while it's not horrendous on here, like say you just have your phone at like 50% brightness or something like that, you won't be able to tell. But when you're looking at your screen full on, you'll be able to notice it quite a bit. And it sucks, but that's the nature of one, an old phone, and one, an LCD display. So yeah, just keep that in mind. This does do quick charge 3, I think. Quick charge 2 at the very least. I can plug this into like Samsung's new adapter, their super, what they call it, their super fast charger or something like that. And it charges really fast. I can plug it into my Razer phone charger and it'll charge really fast. There's really no issues with that either. You can still get pretty good charging speeds even with a massive 4380 milliamp hour battery compared to the 3200 milliamp hour battery that came with the V20 at launch. So yeah, that's something that I definitely would say is still a great bonus. Fast charging, no matter what phone you have, is something that should always be regarded as something great. What else? The cameras, mainly the back 2 cameras, they're still really good. Like, obviously there are some things with like LG's auto processing that have changed and improved over the years, right? But say I take a picture of my TRN-V, one of the monitors of my TRN-V80 right here, right? It's a little bit slow with actually taking the picture and stuff like that, but it's decently detailed. Nothing is like blown out or anything like that. I'll take a better picture just so you guys can actually be like right there in the light. Oh, that's not that great. Yeah, that ain't great. It wasn't focused, but they're still pretty good cameras, even by today's standards. They're not the gold standard. They actually pretty much weren't even back then. But what really, really, really sold this phone was the manual modes, right? Manual photo and manual video mode. So if you want to be a content creator, I wouldn't necessarily go with, I would, but I wouldn't go for this phone necessarily because this phone could heat up very badly, right? You get really hot depending on how much you record video. So in that case, I would go to like a V30 or a V40 where they have cooling systems inside of them. You're going to lose the ability to obviously swap out the battery, but I think a cooling system is definitely an added bonus that I would definitely compromise a removable battery for it personally, but that's just me. Still really good cameras overall. They still do pretty much everything an LG manual mode does now. They just lack the stuff like cinematograph and all the other fancy features that those phones have. But what this has that those don't is a 120-degree wide angle lens. You know, back when people were saying wide angle lenses were just a fad, and now everybody's doing them. It's just like, yeah, this was the first phone with not only a wide angle lens on its back camera, but a 120-degree wide angle lens. It's an 8 megapixel camera, so it's not really all that amazing looking in terms of detail, but in terms of the scope you can get, it's still really nice. And compared to like my Note 10, which also has a 120-degree, the only real difference between that is that it has a higher pixel count, so it'll obviously look more detailed and stuff like that. So yeah, that's something that I would definitely say is still a really great thing to have with this phone. You still get the laser autofocus that LG would like between phones they would take out and bring back. But it was kind of weird. Like the G5, the G6 had it. The G7 didn't have it, but the V30 had it. No, the G7 did have it. Yeah, the G7 had it, but the V40 didn't. And then they just stopped having it after that. So laser autofocus is still pretty nice. We've come a long way from needing it, so I understand why they've taken it out. But it's still like pretty nerdy and stuff and cool to say that, yeah, my phone uses a laser to focus on stuff while taking a picture. So it's still pretty nice nonetheless. What else? Nothing really. Like I said, call quality is still pretty good. It's the speaker up here, as you guys can see, the phone tapers off at both sides right here, and it rests naturally on your ear. It's way better than what say both the V40 and the G8 do. The G8 has an in-display speaker, and it's decent. It's not terrible, but it's something that I definitely would say is not that great compared to just having one right here. It's still decent in terms of that. Overall, that's pretty much it though. Like, this is still a really good phone. What I would use it for personally is media. I would definitely use it just to watch movies on it with the head, obviously, like on a flight or something. Listen to music, most definitely download or convert your music to FLAC locally and then just put it on your phone. Still has a micro SD card slot, obviously, up to 2 terabytes of storage. So you could get a 1 terabyte micro SD card, put it in there. Has 64 gigs of onboard storage, which is kind of measly today. 4 gigabytes of RAM, which is pretty today. But everything else still makes this a beast of a phone. It still performs pretty well. Like I said, frame drops here and there, but that should be expected of a 4-year-old phone. So yeah, let me know what you guys think about this in the comment section below. Do you guys have a V20? Have you had a V20? Do you love it? Do you miss it if you had to give it up? Let me know in the comment section below. This is Sparta. Thank you guys for watching. Thanks for the support. Hope you guys have a wonderful Sunday, whatever time of day it is in your area. And yeah, have a good one.